Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving deep today into some source material you've shared with us. This material details a surprisingly public and, frankly, quite explosive conflict that erupted recently between two figures who are, well, globally recognized, Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's quite something. A really fascinating look at a public spat involving these, major players.
Our mission for this deep dive, and this is based entirely on the sources you've provided, is to explore the timeline of this specific clash. Understand the core arguments they each put forward, pinpoint some of the, well, the more unexpected details that surface in the text, and see what this particular public exchange tells us.
And we're really sticking purely to the information you've given us to understand this event. No outside commentary.
Exactly.
And the sources you've provided give us a remarkably close look at this specific public exchange, which unfolded over a very short period. Think of it almost like a snapshot in time. Our goal isn't to add our own opinions, but just to synthesize this information to really pull out the key moments and the underlying tensions as they are presented in the text you shared. We're focusing purely on the content of that documented interaction itself.
Exactly. This is your deep dive. We're going to guide you through this specific source material, helping you get that shortcut to being well-informed on the details of this particular event. It's quite a story the source lays out. Let's unpack this.
Okay.
So, the sources you've provided set the stage by giving us some background context on the relationship between Musk and Trump before this public blow-up occurred. How does it describe things?
Well, it describes a relationship that reportedly went from what was perceived as, a pretty close friendship.
Close how?
So close, the source actually notes that Musk had even sometimes slept at the White House, which is, well, quite something.
Oh.
And then it goes from that to this very dramatic, very public falling out. So that's a significant shift in dynamics right there. Even before we get into the specific events of the conflict itself, the source kind of uses that as a starting point to understand the tension.
That makes sense. A rapid change then.
It certainly paints a picture of that. And the sources detail Musk's position prior to the specific date the main conflict unfolds, which is June 5th. They highlight his earlier public criticism of Trump's policy bill.
Right, the bill seems central here. What was Musk's issue, according to the source?
The core of his opposition, as the source presents it, centered on the projected cost of this bill and the amount it was expected to add to the federal debt. And this wasn't like a new criticism from him, according to this material. He'd been vocal before.
Okay, so it wasn't just a sudden thing.
No, and the source material includes some really pointed and strong language Musk had already used to describe this legislation, even before the direct conflict with Trump began on that specific Thursday.
Like what?
It quotes him calling the bill a massive, outrageous, pork-filled, disgusting abomination.
Wow, okay. Strong words.
Definitely. The sources also note he used phrases like can't stand it anymore, indicating, a deep level of frustration with the legislation from his perspective, well in advance of the direct personal clash. This shows the intensity of his feelings about the bill itself was already high.
And the sources make it clear that Musk's earlier public statements weren't just general critiques of the bill, right? They were aimed at politicians.
Exactly. The text states he issued public warnings, things like, in November next year, we fire all politicians who betrayed the American people, and used aggressive language like, kill the bill.
So, quite direct.
Very. It also notes that, initially, according to the sources, House Speaker Mike Johnson was the main Republican defending the bill publicly against Musk's criticism. So that gives you a bit more of the political backdrop and shows how the focus eventually shifted specifically to Trump.
Okay, so how did it become direct? When did Trump get pulled in personally, according to the source?
The moment this became a direct personal conflict between Musk and Trump, according to the source material, happened on Thursday, June 5th, the sources pinpoint this specific date and time.
And the timing was interesting.
Yeah, it says it occurred just moments before Trump was scheduled to sit down with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. So the timing itself, according to the source, put this conflict front and center during, an official event. Pretty awkward, you'd imagine.
Yeah, definitely. So what was the actual spark? What set it off on that Thursday?
Yes, and the specific action that directly triggered the clash, as detailed in the sources, was Musk's reposting of a tweet from Trump, but not a recent one from way back in 2013.
2013. What was it about?
That original tweet from 2013 was Trump expressing that he was embarrassed that Republicans were extending the debt ceiling at that time.
Okay. I see where this is going.
Right. And Musk's caption for this repost, as the sources describe, was simply wise words. Exactly. The sources identify this particular repost on Thursday morning as Musk's first direct attack on Trump after days of criticizing the bill more broadly. It seems this specific, maybe calculated move was the spark that ignited the full public firestorm documented in the material.
Okay, here's where the sources you've provided really dive into the rapid unfolding of events, and it gets really interesting. The source material essentially provides a timeline, almost a blow-by-blow account
Yeah, it's very detailed.
of how this conflict exploded politically, largely playing out on social media platforms throughout that single day, Thursday, June 5th. Let's walk through the key moments captured in that timeline from your sources. The pace is just striking.
Absolutely. The sources mark the beginning of the public exchange on Thursday at 12:00 p.m. This is when Trump made his first public comments responding to Musk's criticism of his bill. And where did he do it? During an Oval Office press conference.
Okay, so a very public, official setting.
Right, which gives the initial response added weight, as presented in the material.
And what did Trump say? What's his angle?
At this point, the sources report Trump insinuated that Musk's opposition to the bill stemmed from the fact that he was upset because the electric vehicle, the EV tax credit, was removed from the legislation.
Okay, so framing it as self-interest on Musk's part.
Pretty much. Trump added that he wasn't sure if he and Musk would remain friends after this, and he alleged that Musk knew the inner workings of the bill, which Musk later denies, but
No.
that was Trump's claim.
Right, anything else?
Yeah, the sources also note that Trump suggested Musk was suffering from what he referred to as Trump derangement syndrome.
And how did the source say Trump defined that?
Trump defined it, according to the sources, as something that happens when people who have been close to him or served in his administration then turn against him. So Trump is framing Musk's criticism as a personal attack rooted in, a perceived grievance about a specific provision, the EV credit, and a form of political or personal animus.
Now, this is where the sources highlight a specific detail from the surprising facts section that really pushes back against Trump's core claim about Musk's motive regarding the EV tax credit. What was that?
Yeah, this is key. The sources explicitly point out that Musk had repeatedly said last year, well before this bill was finalized, that he actually supports eliminating the EV tax credit.
Really? He said that publicly?
Yes. It even quotes him from December stating, I think we should get rid of all credits. So the sources state that this prior documented stance from Musk significantly weakens, or as the source puts it, dilutes, Trump's argument that Musk's opposition to the bill was purely because the EV tax credit had been removed.
That's a pretty direct contradiction then, based on the source material.
It certainly seems that way. This nugget from the sources provides a direct counterpoint to one of the central claims made by Trump in this exchange. It forces you, the listener, to look at the stated reasons versus the documented history presented.
Okay, so how did Musk respond to these initial claims from Trump at the press conference?
Well, his direct response challenging Trump's claims came back relatively quickly, according to the source's timeline. At 12:25 p.m. on Thursday, so just 25 minutes later,
And what did he say?
Musk specifically pushed back on two key points. The idea that he was upset about the EV tax credit and the claim that he had known the details of the bill beforehand. The sources quote his tweet directly. False. This bill was never shown to me even once and was passed in the dead of night so fast that almost no one in Congress could even read it.
Okay, so a flat denial.
Yep. This response, as presented, directly contests Trump's narrative about Musk's knowledge and motivation.
The source's timeline then shows Musk escalating the conflict just over 20 minutes later at 12:46 p.m. on Thursday. What happened then? This seems incredibly fast-paced.
It really was. This is where he introduces a new and significant line of attack, shifting the focus to his perceived role in Trump's past election success.
Ah, okay. How so?
The sources detail Musk's specific claims that without me, Trump would have lost the previous election, that Democrats would currently control the House of Representatives, and that Republicans would have a narrower majority in the Senate. Pretty bold claims.
Very bold.
Mm-hmm.
Did the source provide any context for that claim?
It did. The sources underline the weight of this claim by including the detail that Musk had indeed donated more than $250 million toward Trump's campaign.
Wow, $250 million. That's significant.
It is. And according to the sources, Musk didn't stop there. He followed this up with another tweet explicitly accusing Trump of such ingratitude.
So it went from policy to personal very, very quickly.
Absolutely. This move, as presented in the sources, shifts the conflict from policy disagreement to a very public, personal dispute about loyalty, influence, and financial support. It's Musk basically saying, I helped you massively, and this is how you treat me. That's the framing.
Okay. And was there a response from Trump around this time?
Well, this phase of the public exchange aligns with a crucial quote highlighted in your source material. Trump was reportedly quoted saying, I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
Now that timing on that.
The sources note this quote came while Trump was sitting next to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on Thursday. So this timing, as presented, suggests this quote likely occurred around the same time Musk was making his public claims about his financial contributions and Trump's alleged ingratitude. It shows the immediate back and forth of the personal barbs, like they were reacting in near real time.
Okay, the timeline keeps going. What's next, according to the source?
The source's timeline continues, documenting Trump's counterattack later that afternoon at 2:37 p.m. on Thursday. He redirected the focus onto government funding received by Musk's various companies, SpaceX, Tesla, etc.
So hitting back on the financial front.
Exactly. The sources detailed Trump's specific social media post. The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts.
That's a direct threat to Musk's businesses.
It certainly reads that way. This post, as presented, explicitly links Musk's company's financial relationship with the government to the ongoing spat, suggesting that Musk's criticism could potentially be addressed by cutting off those funds.
And did he add anything else?
Yes, Trump also included the line, I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it, which, as noted in the sources, attempts to contrast his potential action with the current administration's approach to Musk's businesses. Sort of a political jab mixed in.
And interestingly, the sources list another post from Trump at that exact same 2:37 p.m. timestamp, indicating a multi-pronged attack launched simultaneously. What was in that one?
Yeah, two posts at once. This second post focused back on their personal interactions and the alleged reason for the initial falling out. It details Trump's specific claims that Musk was wearing thin at the White House during his visits.
Wearing thin.
That's the quote from the source, yeah. And that Trump had eventually asked him to leave, and that Musk just went crazy when the EV tax credit was removed from the bill.
So doubling down on the EV credit thing and adding this detail about asking him to leave.
Precisely. So as the sources present it, Trump is simultaneously attacking Musk's financial ties to the government and pushing this personal narrative about their relationship souring, specifically reiterating the EV credit claim as the root cause.
How did Musk respond to those specific claims about being asked to leave and going crazy over the EV credit?
Musk's denial of these specific, more personal claims came rapidly, again reflecting the fast pace of this online conflict. According to the sources, at 2:48 p.m. on Thursday, just 11 minutes later.
Quick turnaround.
Very. Musk responded directly to Trump's assertions about being asked to leave the White House and the claim about the EV credit motive. The sources quote Musk's response, where he dismissed these claims by saying it's such an obvious lie and called it so sad that Trump would make those specific points.
So just flat out calling Trump a liar on those points.
Right. That's how the source presents his response, yes. It shows the really personal nature of the index being traded at this point, with both individuals directly refuting the other's account of past events.
Okay, this is already intense. Does it escalate further from there?
Oh, yes. The timeline presented in the sources then takes a sharp and perhaps unexpected tangent at 3:00 p.m. on Thursday. Musk introduces a new, entirely unrelated accusation into the mix.
Unrelated how?
The sources detail Musk's allegation on X, and they explicitly state that this allegation was made without evidence claiming that the reason the White House hasn't fully released the Epstein files.
Wait, the Jeffrey Epstein investigation files?
That's the reference, yes. Musk claimed, without evidence according to the source, that the reason they weren't fully released is because Trump is somehow implicated in them.
Wow. That's quite an escalation and completely out of left field compared to the bill or their personal history.
Exactly. This represents a significant shift in the nature of Musk's attacks, moving from policy and personal history to an unsubstantiated accusation involving a highly controversial and unrelated matter, as documented in the sources. A real bombshell thrown into the mix.
And the sources show this escalation continues. What next?
Yes, about an hour later. At 4:09 p.m. on Thursday, the sources note Musk made a pretty dramatic and potentially far-reaching threat, specifically regarding SpaceX, one of his major companies.
The basics. What kind of threat?
It details Musk's public statement that he would decommission SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft.
The Dragon spacecraft. Isn't that what NASA uses?
Exactly. It's the vehicle used by NASA to transport astronauts to the International Space Station. So making a threat about a piece of critical national infrastructure used in space exploration in the midst of a personal and political spat. Well, as presented by the sources, it highlights the extraordinary nature and potential consequences of this public conflict.
That moves beyond just words into potential actions affecting major government programs.
Absolutely. That's a huge deal.
And it didn't stop there, did it? What happened just minutes later?
No, it kept going. Just 2 minutes later, the source's timeline shows another significant public stance from Musk at 4:11 p.m. on Thursday. The sources indicate Musk appeared to endorse impeachment, specifically related to Trump.
He endorsed impeaching Trump. How did that come up?
It details that Musk responded with a simple yes to an ex-user's suggestion. The user's post, as quoted in the sources, read, "President versus Elon. Who wins? My money's on Elon. Trump should be impeached, and J.D. Vance should replace him."
And Musk just replied yes to that whole thing.
According to the sources, yes. By responding yes to that specific suggestion, Musk is presented as endorsing the idea of Trump's impeachment and even the suggested replacement, a very clear political statement as documented in the timeline.
Okay, this is just wild. Anything else in this flurry?
One more key point from that afternoon. At 4:26 p.m., the sources report that Musk weighed in on economic policy in a way he hadn't explicitly done regarding Trump before.
Economic policy.
It details Musk's statement predicting that Trump's tariffs will trigger a recession in the second half of the year.
Had he criticized tariffs before?
The sources note that Musk had previously remained mostly reserved in his public criticism of Trump's tariff policies. So this statement suggests a new area of public attack, adding economic forecasting to the mix of personal, political, and business-related barbs traded throughout that single afternoon.
So if we just take a moment to summarize the intensity and sheer breadth of Musk's attacks throughout that Thursday afternoon, purely based on the sources you've provided, it's staggering.
It really is. He escalated from challenging policy claims and perceived ingratitude to making very personal accusations, endorsing specific political actions like impeachment, issuing a direct threat involving his business's relationship with NASA, and even offering a negative economic prediction related to Trump's policies.
It was a remarkably rapid, wide-ranging, and public assault documented blow by blow in the source material. It really showcases the unique way these high-profile conflicts can unfold in real time, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The speed and the public nature are key takeaways from the sources here.
Now, the sources you've shared also include a section labeled Tangent. While seemingly a deviation from the immediate June 5th conflict, the sources present it as potentially relevant context for understanding the underlying tension, or maybe the atmosphere leading up to that explosive Thursday. Let's take a moment to look at what this section details.
Okay. This tangent section describes a prior joint press conference that occurred on May 30th. So about a week before the main conflict documented in the timeline.
And what was the occasion for that press conference?
According to the sources, this conference was reportedly held to mark Musk's last day leading the Department of Government Efficiency, a role he apparently took on within the administration.
Right. And what did the sources say about the mood or atmosphere there?
Well, they provide specific details suggesting it might have foreshadowed some of the tension. It states that tensions were palpable during the event. Despite both individuals offering praise for each other's efforts, the public niceties, their rapport appeared stiff and uneasy, according to the sources.
Stiff and uneasy, so maybe things weren't great even then.
That's the implication. This detail suggests that even before the direct public spat, the dynamics between them were perhaps already strained, at least as perceived and reported in the sources.
And the sources include some rather specific details about Musk's appearance and behavior at this earlier May 30th event that are presented as potentially relevant context. What were those?
Yeah, these are quite specific. It notes he reportedly appeared in an odd mood.
Odd mood.
Yes, which, according to the sources, prompted speculation on social media that he was tweaking out, suggesting potential drug influence.
Really? The source mentions that speculation.
It does, and the sources explicitly connect this speculation to a New York Times report mentioned elsewhere in the source material, which had previously alleged that Musk engaged in heavy drug use while campaigning for Trump last year. So it links the speculation back to prior reporting mentioned in the sources.
Okay. Any other details from that May 30th event?
Yes, there's also the mention of Musk sporting a black eye during that press conference.
The black eye.
Yes, which he reportedly claimed was from his 5-year-old son. So the sources present this prior event, the stiff and uneasy atmosphere, the odd mood, the drug use speculation linked to other reports, and the black eye. They present these specific, maybe eyebrow-raising details as potentially contributing factors or relevant background noise leading up to the more explosive June 5th clash. It paints a picture of a potentially volatile situation even before the direct attacks began.
Right, interesting context provided there. Now, this remarkably public conflict wasn't confined to just words traded online. Your source material indicates it had measurable, real-world effects, particularly in the financial markets. The sources include a section specifically detailing this impact. Let's look at the financial ripple effect captured in the source material.
Yes, the sources provide detailed data on the impact on Tesla stock, which is obviously closely linked to Musk. It states that shares of Tesla dropped significantly, falling 14% on Thursday, June 5th, the main day of the conflict.
14% in one day, that's huge.
It's a massive drop. This caused the stock to close at $284.70. And the sources point out that this single-day fall completely erased a month's worth of gains that Tesla's stock had accumulated during May. Wiped out.
Wow. Did they put that in historical context?
They did. The sources add context by stating that this 14% drop marked the 11th worst single trading day for Tesla since its initial public offering IPO back in 2010, and they cite FactSet for that historical data. So a drop of that magnitude, especially linked to a public spat involving the CEO, is a significant detail provided by the sources. It highlights how market sentiment can react really strongly.
And what about Musk's personal wealth, obviously tied to Tesla stock?
Exactly. The sources also detail the immediate impact on his personal net worth. It reports that his estimated net worth tumbled by a staggering $27 billion on that Thursday.
$27 billion in one day.
Yeah, $27 billion, bringing it down to $388 billion. Now, the sources immediately add that despite this massive one-day loss, he still remained the world's wealthiest person by a considerable margin.
Oh, still number one, but...
Ouch. Right. But the figure of $27 billion erased in a day is still striking. The sources also provide context for his wealth by noting his ownership percentage in Tesla, stating he owns about 12% of the company's stock, excluding options. That explains why Tesla's performance hits his net worth so directly.
Was the impact limited to Tesla, or did the sources mention other stocks, like maybe related to Trump?
It wasn't limited to Tesla, according to the sources. They also detail the effect on Trump Media and Technology Group's stock, which is associated with Trump's social media platform.
And how did that fare?
The sources report that its stock also closed down significantly on Thursday, falling 8% to $20.12 per share. And they note that this price brought shares to their lowest point since April 16th, according to the sources. So it suggests the public conflict had a negative effect on the stock of the company directly tied to the other individual involved in the spat.
Interesting. Any other financial effects mentioned?
Yes, the sources even extend the financial impact reporting to several cryptocurrencies.
Cryptocurrencies. Which ones?
It reports that Ethereum fell 7%, Solana dropped 6%, and perhaps most notably, the Musk-backed Dogecoin slid 9%.
Dogecoin, too. Oh.
Yeah. And Bitcoin prices, according to the sources, also sunk by 3% by Thursday evening, although they note this wasn't as sharp a fall as some of the other cryptocurrencies mentioned.
So why include crypto? What's the connection?
Well, the inclusion of cryptocurrencies in the reported financial impact, especially Dogecoin, which Musk has often tweeted about, suggests that the market reaction, as captured in the sources, extended beyond traditional stocks and into digital assets that are sometimes influenced by Musk's public statements and profile. It paints a picture of a broad, immediate financial ripple effect documented in your source material.
So, based on the sources, we see a measurable, immediate financial consequence to this public conflict, affecting stocks related to both individuals and even certain cryptocurrencies. It really highlights the significant market attention paid to this public spat and the individuals involved. The sources provide the data to back that up.
Definitely. Real money involved.
After that incredibly intense public exchange documented on Thursday, things must have calmed down. The source material indicates there were attempts to de-escalate the situation and provides an account of what happened on Friday, June 6th. Was it an immediate truce?
Well, not exactly an immediate cessation of hostilities, but yes, the source's timeline provides details stretching into late Thursday night and Friday morning, showing some moves towards de-escalation.
Like what?
At 11:16 p.m. on Thursday, according to the sources, Trump made comments that seemed to downplay his public falling out with Musk. This was in a report from Politico, where he reportedly told the outlet something like, "Oh, it's okay."
Oh, it's okay after that day. Seems a bit mild.
It does. Could be seen as an initial move to cool things down, maybe, at least in his public framing to that one outlet.
Were there other efforts behind the scenes?
Yes. Concurrently, the sources also mentioned that behind the scenes, White House officials were reportedly working to de-escalate the situation. They were apparently trying to set up a call between Musk and Trump, according to the sources.
Okay, so the administration was concerned.
It indicates concern, yes, and an effort to resolve it directly.
And what about Musk? Did he show signs of backing down, especially from that SpaceX threat?
Yes. Early on Friday morning, specifically at 12:30 a.m., the sources indicate Musk appeared to backtrack on that dramatic threat, the one about decommissioning SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft.
How did that happen?
According to the sources, this shift occurred after a follower on X urged him not to go through with it, basically saying it would hurt the country.
And Musk listened.
Seems so. The sources quote Musk's response to that follower indicating a change of heart. Good advice. Okay, we won't decommission Dragon. So this particular detail presented by the sources shows a potential responsiveness to public feedback, or maybe just a reconsideration of how severe that threat was.
Okay, walking back the biggest threat. What else?
Just half an hour later, at 1:20 a.m. on Friday, the sources report that Musk signaled he was willing to de-escalate his broader fight with Trump.
How did he signal that?
This moment is linked in the sources to a tweet from hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman. The sources describe Ackman as both a Trump supporter and a Musk ally, sort of a mutual friend figure here.
Right, and what did Ackman say?
Ackman tweeted that both men should make peace for the benefit of our great country. We are much stronger together than apart. Calling for unity.
And Musk's response?
The sources note Musk's public response to Ackman's tweet was simply, "You're not wrong."
You're not wrong. Okay, subtle, but
Exactly. According to the sources, this response was interpreted as a signal of openness to ending the conflict, maybe a tentative olive branch.
however, it's crucial to note, as the source material makes clear, that these signals of de-escalation and openness to a truce weren't the end of the public jabs, were they? The sources indicate this wasn't a complete or immediate stop.
That's right. It wasn't quite a full ceasefire yet. The source's timeline shows that even after signaling openness to de-escalation, later on Friday morning, around 4 a.m.,
What happened then?
Musk reposted a follower who had stated that Republicans will likely lose the House in 2026.
Not a direct attack on Trump, but still critical of the party.
Exactly. This repost, as presented by the sources, continues to align Musk with content critical of the Republican Party, even after those truce signals. So, mixed messages, perhaps.
And did he keep attacking directly?
The sources explicitly state that despite those earlier signals of a potential truce, also around 4:30 a.m. on Friday, Musk continued to attack the president's allies, specifically mentioning Steve Bannon as an example, and also continued to attack Trump's signature spending bill itself.
So, still going after the bill and allies, even while signaling peace.
That's what the source details indicate, yes. The signals of de-escalation were mixed with continued criticism of the political sphere around Trump and the central legislative issue that triggered the whole thing.
Did the markets react to the de-escalation signals at all?
They did. The sources do report a positive financial impact early on Friday that seems directly linked to these signals. At 7 a.m. on Friday, the sources note that the price of Tesla's shares, remember they plummeted 14% on Thursday. Well, they were up significantly, around 4.4% in pre-market trading on Friday morning.
So, the market liked the idea of peace.
It seems so. This rise, occurring after Musk signaled he was open to a truce with Trump, as reported by the sources, suggests the market reacted positively to the potential winding down of the public dispute, just as it had reacted negatively to its eruption.
But was Trump on board with the truce by Friday morning?
Well, the public back and forth didn't entirely disappear, according to the sources. At 8:17 a.m. on Friday, the sources report Trump made comments to ABC News in a Friday morning interview indicating the tension wasn't fully resolved from his side.
What did he say?
He reportedly stated that he was not particularly interested in talking to Musk right now and reiterated the claim that Musk had lost his mind.
Okay, so it's still pretty frosty from Trump's side publicly that morning.
Seems that way, yes. It shows a continued public expression of frustration from Trump, even after the de-escalation signals from Musk and Ackman.
Was there anything else on Friday indicating the state of things?
One more detail around noon. At 12:06 p.m. on Friday, the sources included detail about Trump potentially selling his Tesla Model S car.
Selling his Tesla. Didn't he make a big deal of buying it?
Exactly. The sources report that Trump was thinking about selling the car, which he had bought back in March and showcased publicly on the White House driveway at that time. It was seen then as a public show of support for Musk and Tesla.
So selling it would be symbolic.
Potentially. The sources add that the New York Times, citing an unnamed White House source, reportedly said the car was already for sale. So this potential move, as presented in the sources, could be interpreted as another symbolic public step in the unresolved conflict, perhaps withdrawing that previous gesture of support.
So where did the sources leave things as of Friday afternoon?
The sources conclude this section by stating that otherwise, as of Friday afternoon, the Musk-Trump feud appeared to simmer in public, with some speculation they could mend fences in a matter of days. So it leaves the resolution somewhat open-ended, according to the material provided, a simmering, uncertain state.
So based on the source material, the state of the feud as of Friday afternoon was one of simmering tension, a mix of signals, some clear attempts or openness to de-escalation alongside continued public jabs, particularly from Trump's side in the morning, and lingering uncertainty about how quickly or if reconciliation would truly happen. The rapid escalation was followed by a kind of murky detente.
That sums it up well based on the sources, yes.
Okay, let's circle back to the trigger. The core catalyst for this entire public spat, as consistently identified and detailed in your source material, was Trump's policy bill. The sources dedicate sections to providing crucial details about the bill itself, its legislative status, its projected financial impact. This seems like important context. Let's briefly touch on that information provided in the what to watch for and big number sections.
Absolutely. Understanding the bill is key to understanding the conflict as presented. The sources detail the bill's legislative journey so far, explaining its passage through the House of Representatives.
How did it pass the House?
They note that it passed in a party-line vote last month, according to the sources, and they highlight that this happened after last-minute revisions were reportedly made specifically to appease certain Republican holdouts. That suggests there was already internal party debate even before this public spat blew up.
So it wasn't smooth sailing even within the party. Where is the bill now?
The sources also explain the bill's current status in the legislative process. It is currently being negotiated by the Senate.
Okay, so not law yet. Still in play.
Exactly. This context is important because it means the bill's final form and passage are not yet guaranteed, making the debate around it, and by extension, the conflict it triggered, still relevant to its potential future.
Is there a timeline for the Senate?
The sources mention a reported deadline set by Republican leaders for moving the bill forward, July 4th. The stated goal, according to the sources, is to get the bill onto Trump's desk for signage by that specific date. So there's a time pressure element to the ongoing negotiations and debate in the Senate.
But the sources also highlight significant challenges to the bill's passage in the Senate, right? It's
Yep.
not a done deal there.
Not at all. They note reported GOP resistance in the upper chamber, suggesting not all Republicans there are aligned on the bill as it passed the House. Plus, the sources also mention that a few House Republicans have reportedly expressed regret about voting for it,
Regret. Why?
stating they were apparently unaware of certain provisions in the bill when it came to a vote. These factors, according to the sources, pose real threats to the bill's timely passage by that July 4th deadline. It's facing headwinds.
What's actually in the bill, according to the sources? What promises does it fulfill?
The sources provide details on the key campaign promises the legislation is reportedly intended to fulfill. These include what the sources describe as an extension of Trump's 2017 tax cuts.
Okay, the big tax cuts.
Right. Also, a provision for no taxes on tips and overtime pay, and measures for additional border security. So, hitting some key campaign themes.
And how is it paid for? Or is it?
Well, crucially, the sources explicitly state that the bill is paid for, quote, in part, by cuts to Medicaid. This detail about Medicaid cuts is specifically mentioned by the sources as a component of the bill's funding mechanism, providing insight into the specific policy trade-offs involved.
Cuts to Medicaid to pay for tax cuts and other spending. Got it.
And this brings us back to the big number mentioned in the source material, which directly relates to Musk's initial and sustained criticism of the legislation, the debt issue.
Right, the cost. What was the number?
The sources state that the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO, which provides independent analyses of budgetary and economic issues, estimated that the bill, if enacted, would add a significant $2.4 trillion to the federal debt over the next decade.
2.4 trillion.
Trillion, yes, with a T. The sources break down this estimate. The CBO estimated the bill would cost $4.2 trillion, mostly due to the extension of the tax cuts, and save $1.8 trillion from other measures, including those Medicaid cuts.
So 4.2 trillion in costs, 1.8 trillion in savings, netting out to 2.4 trillion added to the debt.
Exactly. This $2.4 trillion figure, as presented in the sources based on the CBO estimate, provides the specific financial basis cited by Musk for his intense criticisms of the legislation. It highlights the core policy disagreement, the massive projected debt increase that seems to have ignited this public conflict. The sources use this number to frame the scale of the bill's projected financial impact.
Wow. So what does all of this taken together from your source material mean? We've taken the sources you provided and really gone on a deep dive into a remarkably public, rapid, and wide-ranging conflict that unfolded over just a couple of days between two of the world's most prominent figures. It's quite a saga.
It really is, and we've extracted the key elements presented in the text. The swift escalation of personal and political attacks, moving from policy debate to accusations of ingratitude, claims of election influence, throwing in unrelated controversies. It was a lot.
A real roller coaster.
Definitely. We've seen the specific points of contention that emerged, the bill's projected cost, that whole debate around EV credits, the differing accounts of their personal history. We've explored the significant financial fallout captured in the market data provided in the source's real billions lost, at least temporarily. And we examined the somewhat uncertain and mixed signals regarding resolution reported as of Friday afternoon. Still simmering.
It's fascinating, based on the sources you've shared, to see how quickly relationships and public perceptions can shift and how intensely these dynamics can play out in real time on platforms like social media. I mean, involving claims about everything from policy details and huge financial contributions to personal interactions, and even invoking unrelated scandals.
Yeah.
The sources really document the sheer speed and scope of it.
Yeah, this deep dive into your source material really highlights the dynamic intersection of personal dynamics, significant business interests,
Yeah.
threats to government contracts, impacting stock prices, major political maneuvering, and of course, public communication strategies among incredibly high-profile individuals.
Right.
It shows how disagreements, particularly about substantial policy issues like a major spending bill with that multi-trillion-dollar projected impact, according to the CBO, can trigger these really wide-ranging public exchanges with tangible effects that extend right into financial markets. It's not just talk.
Okay, so for you, the listener, here's something to mull over based on this deep dive into your source material. Considering how this intense public spat unfolded over just a couple of days, the breadth of accusations traded back and forth from policy to personal to, well, everything else, and its reported effects on markets and even specific business interests mentioned in the sources. What does this particular documented instance tell us about the nature of power, influence, and public communication among today's most prominent figures, especially when they wield such significant platforms?
Yeah, and maybe think about what kind of potential ripple effects might such highly personalized public conflicts have in broader spheres, given the platforms these individuals command and the sheer range of topics they touched upon in just 48 hours or so.
Lots to think about there. That's it for this deep dive. We hope unpacking this source material has been valuable for you.